Stop me if you heard this before. Houston goes long stretches without scoring the basketball, and this one involves 76-73. Got to get some balls in the basket. Can't get past Tennessee in the Players Era Invitational.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs. I'm your host, Parker Ainsworth. He's more teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, think of making Locked On Cougs your first listen post-game of the Houston game against Tennessee tonight, or the first listen in the morning the next day, and making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. More on that fun later, as hard as it's feel fun right now, as Houston falls to Tennessee 76-73. And look, we're going to talk about the scoring problems here in the first segment. I want to spend the second segment trying to figure out what other bright spots there may be, and then we'll see whatever comes next in that third and final one for the Cougs. Now, as far as what their next game is, that is actually very much still up in the air based on other results happen tonight in Las Vegas, so we probably won't have those by the end of the show. You might have those in the morning, though, when more Locked On Cougs comes out for you. All right, so Houston goes through stretches of this game. Sorry to cough in the mic, but I'm just kind of where I feel about this game without a field goal. I think in the first 10 minutes of the second half, Houston scored a measly 7 points. They were 2 of 17 at one stretch, 0 of 10 at the same somewhere in that same stretch, and really had troubles finding the basket. And I think what's baffling, again, I am a assistant high school basketball coach. I mean, to say like I'm some sort of an X's and O's genius, but I do think I know a little bit about it. And in looking at this, I don't know that there were a whole bunch of possessions in a low possession game that I'd be like, Houston took a bad shot there. There were several possessions in that stretch. There was like, oh, do we need to take that shot there when we haven't scored in 3, 4, 5 minutes, right? And I think that is a discrepancy people have trouble making sometimes. Honestly, when you're a fan, you want to see every shot go in, and if you haven't made a shot in a while, every shot becomes a bad shot really quickly. You start questioning who's shooting them or whatever. Right now, Houston did finish this game with 73 points. Houston did finish this game shooting 46% from the field and 38% from behind the arc. The real problem was that there were just stretches where that just did not feel like the reality, because in those moments it wasn't. And then also that, if we're going to be honest here, Houston's offense only generated 11 free throw attempts while Tennessee's generated 29. Houston gave them a few there at the end, but it was still over 20 before it got to that point. And that, I think, speaks to the kind of shots Houston's finding here. Houston got a lot of jump shots up in this game, and they fell late. And frankly, Kingston kind of saved some of those field goal percentages later as well. But ultimately, you got to attack the cup, got to attack the rim. And I really think Sharp's early fouls hurt his offense in the second half. And what I mean by that is Sharp was out of most of the first half. Emanuel Sharp played just 21 minutes in this game. I don't know that he came off the floor for more than a minute or two in the second half. And he got those 2 fouls early before the 5-minute mark of the first half and came on for the rest of the half. And I don't think he ever looked fully, even when he knocked down that 3 that cut it and we felt like good about things. Like, I don't think he ever really felt in the groove in the same way he was last night. He had just 8 points, right? And he's a guy that I'm anticipating being Houston's leading scorer by the season's end. It's been Kingston more nights than not, literally tonight as well. But I think Emanuel is going to wish he played that in the 3-game series, kind of, best 2 out of 3 kind of situation, because if he gets in his groove early or gets his legs under him early, he's feeling the game, I think those second half shots look different for him in different spots as well. I also think that, bluntly, because the way Tennessee was taking charges and taking physical contact on the inside, I don't know how it felt like Houston was reluctant to attack the rim a lot of times, whether that's Chris Sinak or Emanuel Sharp, whoever, right? Outside of Kingston, Flemings, and a couple of Uzan layups, I don't know that Houston attacked the rim with the ferocity they maybe needed to. And I think that raises interesting questions. I see people in the chat, people on socials, etc., talking about like, well, does this mean rotations are off? I mean, Mercy Miller and Chase McCarty played a combined 16 minutes, predominantly the first half, I believe, and McCarty was 2 of 3 behind the arc, right? Like should he have played more? Maybe. I do think he's a guy who can help this team out. If you ask Sampson, I have not asked Sampson. I have the guys I talk to or whatever, and he's not one of them. I'd imagine most people would say like, yeah, but he's missing this defensive rotation, or when we monster this, we double that. He's missing this thing on the backside, and those things are important, right? Keeping the team from scoring is a more consistent thing to fall back on than being 2 of 3 from behind the arc. That said, we could use some of that shooting in that stretch in the second half. And honestly, like I said, there were not a bunch of looks. I'm like, oh, I can't believe they took that one. It was more of a situation where it was like, okay, but did we need after we haven't made the last 4 or 5 shots, do we need a swing the ball 3-pointer as opposed to getting the ball downhill and attacking the rim a little bit? Those were more my complaints on the offense. Things like this, losing the free throws again, I don't think that's the case. They did not shoot enough free throws, I don't think, in this game. Like, I think they attacked the cup, but they shot the ball 8 for 11 from the free throw line. That's plenty fine. And they also shoot a bajillion of them a day. I don't know if that's a fair criticism. I don't think many people are super, super worried about this, whether it's Adrian here or Liam down here commenting as much. And I think that's kind of the sentiment. We remember here a year ago when Houston left Las Vegas, having lost a couple games, and they'd already lost to Auburn the first week of the season. They had 3 losses before Thanksgiving last year, if you remember. And that's mathematically not possible right now. I guess I could theoretically lose again before Thanksgiving, but they wouldn't have 3. And that team still ended up going on a run that was truly remarkable by the end of the season. And I think when you look at what Sampson builds and what these teams do, they look at this team. I'm sorry, I would usually be muting myself and pausing, but it's a live show, so I can't quite do that. So I'm going to try and cough off mic. I've had this thing for the better part of a month now, it feels like. But when you look at what Houston's having trouble with and struggling with, it feels like to me the real deal is not free throws as much as it's during rim pressure. Now, if you're trying to liken those two, and that's what that comment was about, maybe that is a more fair complaint. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that in the thing down below. But I do think that when I criticize this offense, it's more about like, okay, if I think about like the Bulls of the 90s, or as Houstonians, all right, like the Rockets right now are a little bit more hard, but like the Harden years of the Rockets, right? If it got down to you hadn't scored a basket in 4 or 5 possessions, we're finding something to get Harden the ball at the top of the key, right? And whatever you think about him, that was what they did, right? Right now at Durant, it looks like that's going to be doing Durant on the right wing. Houston's finding what that is for them right now in a lot of ways. Okay, we have stretches of we got to find a way to get the ball in the basket. We've had 3 or 4 empty trips. Who gets the ball and where is it? Last year, it was LJ Cryer, and it was Franklin on the left wing. It was fairly consistently some sort of we call it a rocket cut. I think some people call it a sideways elevator popping out kind of thing, right? And that was how they got him there. In this year's iteration of the Houston Cougars, we're trying to figure out what that was, right? 2 years ago, it was Jamal Shed getting the ball at top key, space out to your spot you can catch and shoot, and he's going downhill as fast as he can. Marcus Sasser on the right wing coming off the floppy action the year before that. They've had lots of options in what they do here in these spots. They haven't found it yet this year. And I think part of the reason I'm upset, disappointed, but not concerned, right? I don't know if that's what my voice is coming across like here, but upset, disappointed, not concerned is they haven't found it yet. Now, is it Kingston in a very similar Jamal Shed role where he's like, hey, I'm going to attacking downhill. You guys get ready to catch and shoot if it comes to you. Is it Milos on the floater? Is it Emanuel on the right wing? There's been stretches that they seem to be attacking with Jojo at the right block. Is that it? I don't know that's my go-to. I like the drop-off spot for him there. I'm not sure that he's what I want to catch in a post-up spot there still. And I just feel like we're going to figure out what that is in the coming days and weeks. And I don't know necessarily where that goes. Now, as far as how, like, as someone who's been critical of referees before and things like that, and foul calls and this and whatever, and admittedly had my problems with what happened last night. I don't think either referee would have, or either coach would have liked the fact that this game in the first half was 11 fouls to 9 fouls. I don't think that would have been good for anyone. I do think it's worth pointing out the second half was 10-6, and Houston gave 4 intentionally at the end, right? Like, they just seem to take the ignition, the stop calling them down the stretch there. Tennessee got 29 free throws in this game versus Houston's just getting 11, and that doesn't seem to me necessarily indicative of total foul count when given how many times Houston was trying to foul in the last 2 minutes. It feels more like, to me, it's when the fouls happened, attacking the rim, attacking the paint. And again, that feels like a team that is shooting too many jump shots. And when they're not going in, it gets magnified. Look, I am still disappointed. I'm going to try and move into a bright spot segment next, because I do think there were a few of those, but there will probably still be some disappointments in that. Just a fair warning. Get to that in one second. But today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA is back. College basketball is in full swing, obviously. You got college football wrapping up with rivalry week. Pro football is heading towards the playoffs. There's no better place to get in all of that action than FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA, because even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets in the same game parlay for a lot bigger payout at the end. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, your support betting partner of the NBA. Parker Ainsworth, Locked on Coogs here. Thank you for joining me post-game, making Locked on Coogs your first listen post-game or your first listen the next morning after the game is over, and making the Locked on Sports Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Houston falls, and I do want to point out that one positive I'm drawing from this one, and I'm not sure I'm completely going to get off of my disappointed tone about this game, is that I thought Kingston Flemings looked a lot better in the clutch moments, obviously, than previously, between the great rebound that saved a possession, the layup at the end, the three-pointer in transition at the end. Like, those are moments where I don't think he got it frankly, in the Auburn game. And so in another tight game, he gets those moments come back to him and he's making adjustments. I think that shows growth. I think that shows improvement. And frankly, I would point out too, like, Milos Uzan feels way more comfortable. He and Kingston are playing the 2-point guard-ish system, I think, very well compared to how they did against Auburn. I think those are all things that are improving. I think I can continue to sing Isaiah Harwell's praises. Only has 3 points. I don't mean to say he's the scorer he's going to be once his legs are completely under him, but he's diving on the floor, getting loose balls, all that kind of stuff. And I think that ultimately those are going to pay dividends for him in the long run. And I guess in the bright spot is that you lost a close one here, and you feel like you lose a close one here, not completely dissimilar, but a much different feeling close one than when you almost beat Alabama in the Players Era last year. Last year, I thought in the Players Era against Alabama, it felt like we played a lot worse than we did tonight, especially the loss to San Diego State was probably the worst game of the year for Houston last year. This is neither of those games. And frankly, the margin of defeat is not the same in either of those games last year either. So there's probably some positive in that is hard to actually realize, even if we can intellectually talk about it at this moment, right? I said in the warming up pregame kind of show after talking to Eric for a second about Nate Ament, and I thought Ament was fine, right? I really wanted a lot more out of Chris Sinak tonight. He limited his own minutes of fouls. He did get 11 rebounds. He's a rebounding. I think he's going to get over 10 rebounds a game this year. I think we just go ahead and Sharpie that in, right? But offensively, it feels like he's got so many tools in the toolbox. None of them are very refined yet. Like, he can hit threes. He can hit turnarounds. He can drive. He can stop and pop. He can catch and shoot. He can do so many things. it's like he's got 100 pennies and I want him to have 4 quarters. You know what I mean? Like I want a handful of things that are really good, and he's still got so many things to pick from that it's too many variables in the math problem. Like I need you catch it here, you rip through 2 dribble pop, or you catch here, you dream shake one time fade. Like whatever your move is, I don't necessarily care which one it is, right? I feel like to just dive into fully one or two of those, right, and really get that thing going. Now, I say all that to say we're being hypercritical of the team that lost a neutral floor top 20, not lost on a neutral site to a top 20 team that was bluntly far more rested. Their game was much more of a cupcake last night than Houston's ended up being, which could also be Houston's own fault. I don't mean to like put that off on anyone else, right? And I do think that Houston looked like a team that played an overtime game last night. It turned into a jump shooting team over the course of the second half, the first part of the second half for sure. And it was a jump shooting team that had what looked like dead legs. And that is a recipe for loss just across the board. It's going to be a recipe for loss all the time, right? So Houston loses, and that's the way that goes. What else could they have found offensively? I mentioned that McCarty and Miller played a lot of the first half, not a lot of the second half. Part of that was Emanuel Sharp was not in the same kind of foul trouble in the second half, right? I just wonder if there was maybe more McCarty at the power forward kind of minutes you were missing. Tennessee had some real size, and I think Sampson and them worry about that defensively, maybe more so, but got to find ways to get the ball in the basket. Yeah, sitting here trying to make up more bright spots. I don't know, guys. Like Houston loses, it's hard to think of bright spots. And last year they lost a total of 5 games. Each one of them was gut wrenching. Like, why do we do that kind of night? I sit here and look at that though, and I just, yeah, I think that Alexis points out that Kingston had the most points for either team, and so that's the bright spot. Kingston. He seemed determined, I think, down the stretch. There seemed like some moments where he and Gillespie were kind of going at it one-on-one. And to be fair, that's a senior guard, been in the tournament before with Belmont and is now at Tennessee. And we know Rick Barnes has had some real strong point guards. Houston Willeridge's own TJ Ford, I guess, being kind of the front end of that lineage when Barnes is at Austin. I think that that's fair to say Kingston had his matchup and had his way with his matchups fair. I just wish that other guys attacked the rim like that tonight. And, I think they're going to find ways to generate that as well. There's also bluntly going to be a lot of nights where they don't play on back-to-backs because most college games are not on back-to-backs. Even in the tournament, it's 2 and 3 days, right? And if you're not playing on back-to-backs, your legs are fresh. You might see those threes go in. You might see those jump shots go in. And it's a whole different ball game all of a sudden. You lost by 3. It's not like you're talking about needing a whole lot of different margin for victory here. I will say Tennessee is currently ranked 17th. They were ranked 20th last week. I bet they're in the top 12 or so next week. They might win this whole Players Era Invitational. We'll see, because they had their 20-point margin of victory last night. They'll be 2-0, get 3 points from tonight. We'll see where they get placed in that. Tennessee's going to be another team in the Sweet 16 contending for Elite 8. Rick Barnes has the most wins of any active college basketball coach. He's just about a season ahead of Sampson or so, maybe a season and a half ahead of Sampson. And that's a good basketball team. And that's a good basketball team. I did think Houston had an advantage they didn't take advantage of, and I'll say that again. I think that they could have gotten easier shots or gotten shots at the rim more so. Instead, they took jumpers and they didn't fall. And that's the way that one goes. I will say that one thing that did concern me a little bit was the big fella, Jalen Carey, the Carey brother, older brother, went to Duke. Jalen Carey. He is not the first guy he's not the last guy, I should say, over 250, 260 pounds he's going to have to deal with on the inside. I felt like there were kind of a handful of – he didn't have a bajillion – he had 7 rebounds, right, in 22 minutes. But he turned them all into putbacks because they were mostly offensive rebounds, and it felt like he kind of, at different points, once the game got physical in the late second half, was able to just kind of dictate, I want the ball now, and go get it, put it in, right? And that'll be interesting to see, like when you play Badunga at Kansas, or there's the big fella over at What the big fella at Arizona State, Toppin at Tech, those kind of guys. Toppin's, I guess, not 260 pounds, but it'll be interesting to see how they keep those guys off the glass, because what you're seeing is a hyper aggression on the ball and then letting stuff happen behind you, obviously. I want to keep talking about what comes next for Houston. And admittedly, I say at the front of this, I don't necessarily know who their next game will be. We'll find out more about that over the course of the night. But before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time, because Game Time is the best place to get in on the action. College football is in rivalry week and wrapping up. College basketball is in full swing, but in Houston, you've got the Rockets, the Texans, Astros this spring, comedy, music, theater, whatever you need to get into. Game Time helps you get in the action, because as tough as some of the stuff may be, the toughest part is often just getting in the door. That's why I use Game Time. So I Locked On uses Game Time. The app that gets the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to get last-minute tickets to the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Pull up Game Time, couple taps. I'm really strongly trying to see, can there be more Houston Cougar red in Waco against Baylor this weekend than there will be Baylor green? Because I think that will be actually relatively easy to do based on what you see from the Baylor crowd. Take the extra credit buying college football tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to buy again. This promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here, and then trying to figure out what's next for this team. We're going to speak in a little bit broader strokes than and we're not going to look at it quite from a micro lens, because honestly, we had to see the rest of the games play out to understand exactly who Houston plays in the next and final game of the Players Era Invitational in Las Vegas. I'd imagine, based on the field, it's a good basketball team, and I think that that's part of the fun of this tournament. And we mentioned the start of the week, CBS I think had it first, but Front Office Sports and Sports Business Journal both had much more in-depth articles about that the Players Era and the Big 12 are merging in a lot of ways, and so the top 8 from this year's Big 12 will automatically be rolled over into next year's Player Era Invitational, and they're going to hope to keep that relationship going for the coming years. It's a great event from an NIL perspective. Each team gets $1 million, and you get more as you win games, right? All good things. But the next thing I think for Houston is going to be determining what that need a bucket option is. Again, they went to Jawan Roberts on that left for the left hook for 6 years, it felt like. And I guess it wasn't the entirety of his time in Houston, but it felt like it, right? If you go to Marcus Sasser on the right wing and floppy sets or whatever, like there's been, and frankly, there was a whole tournament game where it just came down to finding Tremont Mark in the mid range, right? Like those kinds of options are there for Houston, and they just have to find them. And I think what's going to be next for Houston is between the next Players Era game, which is tomorrow or Thursday. It's up in the air right now. Then you play Florida State on the 6th of December, who's looking good, not great, right? Like good enough to beat you, not great enough that I'm concerned, if that makes any sense. Like you got to play well, but it's not going to play your best game and hope for some breaks. I don't know if that makes any sense to y'all, but I think that you'll see Houston continue to test out, okay, is it Kingston here? Is it Kingston and Jamal Shed kind of let's get out of his way kind of way? Is it going to be Milos in a high screen and roll, let him attack as a true playmaker kind of way? Is Emanuel Sharp and the way he crashes into the rim, right? What's the option going to be? I think they kind of were hoping for some Jojo Tugler low post action to kind of help continue the same formula that Jawan Roberts had. I think Tugler is the kind of guy that's capable of averaging a double-double in the Big 12 and probably will once you get to conference play, settle in a little bit. Remember, he had a whole offseason with a foot in a boot. Like, he's still coming back, right? I just don't know if the offensive game and touch is there. I do think when I look at the guys like Kenneth Fareed in the NBA, if you remember that NBA name, like there is a path for Jojo to have a long-time NBA career if he can stay healthy. It's going to require a little bit more choosing his spots and finesse than he's played with thus far. And I think, frankly, look, I like frankly, one of the nice things I was telling my wife about the game while watching it tonight. The nice thing about Houston is, like, I like all the kids. They've got great kids. Jojo Tugler's a great kid. he's going to get lit up in film. And frankly, Emanuel Sharp from parts of the first half will get lit up in film. And there'll be moments, I think, where they're going to look at it, just pause and be like, what were you thinking here? To a number of different players from this. And I think that's good for this program. It's good for this team. And bluntly, it's a lot like what happened a year ago. Right when they left Las Vegas, they headed back from Thanksgiving and were 4-3. And everyone's like, guys, what are we doing? And they started off 4-3 and finished the season 35-5, and were less than 60 seconds away from being 36-4 with the national championship. And again, there were breaks along the way. You beat UCF at the buzzer. You had a crazy comeback against Kansas. Sure, right? I don't know if you win those coin flips this year or not. I do know that the coaching staff is ready to continue to build this program anew every year. Not like it's a phoenix from the ashes or whatever necessarily, but I think that they'll be set up for that. And so we'll see over the next couple of games what Houston leans into as far as that finding its spot. Now, I don't mean to pick comments out and argue for a second, because that's really not the point of the show, and I don't think anyone wants to listen to that. But Christian Nank's absolutely a one and done. And I think the biggest thing there is that even without having played a whole bunch of games with offensive prowess as a Houston Cougar, before the Auburn game, people were saying, "Oh, this is a guy might be a top 7, top 6 pick." He's not going to fall out of the top 12. He's just not. And part of that is potential, and potential means you hadn't done it yet. Shout out to George Kirk, legendary high school football coach at Texas. Most high school football coach would say that, though, right? Potential just means you hadn't done it yet. But Chris, like I said, he's got so many tools. And I think the problem is that he's got the 100 pennies, not the 4 quarters. He's got a bunch of things he's good at offensively. And I really just want the J1 left hook. I want something like that. I know this is 2 points every single time. And instead, it's got a bunch of things they can do that are 2 points 70% of the time or 60% of the time. That's crazy. You can do so many things that well. But I just need something to be all the time. And maybe the thing that Houston gets all the time is Kingston getting downhill. Kingston and Jamal Shed are very different athletes. Kingston is taller and longer and leaner, but also probably more explosive as far as getting above the rim goes. Jamal Shed was shorter, stockier, stronger, shedded contact better, right? He's also much older by the time he finished at Houston, but you see the comparison there. In both guys' cases, though, I think that you can make the argument that the offense works the best when everything is operating at we are all option 1B, and option 1A is that guy dunking the basketball, right? Like that guy, the option 1A is that guy attacking the rim, shots the ball, finishing up. Option 1A is that guy attacking the rim, attacking the cup, attacking downhill. And everyone else is option 1B and ready to be that 1B. I think that is truthfully, as at 7 games in, where I'm feeling about this program. If you got a different option, what do you think the best, let's fall into this and make this our thing offense is? I don't think it's shooting a bunch of mid-range and deep jump shots. Tell me what yours is in the comments down below. We're going to have another episode out for you, at least one more in the morning, to talk about whatever comes next in the Players Era Invitational. We hope to get some more talk with Baylor this week. There's a bunch of chaos happening at Baylor. It's kind of hard to pin stuff down over there, but Houston does play Baylor in a football game this Saturday as well. Oh, and then Thursday is this whole Thanksgiving holiday. We'll talk about that as well throughout the week. Locked On Coogs, a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. Hit subscribe to the bell so you know when things go live. Go Coogs.